why don't you see the red flags that are in your life? Why is it that you can't spot them before you get into a relationship, which then leads to like the difficulty and the trauma, and then you go through the whole cycle. At the end you're like, oh my god, like this, I didn't see this stuff. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, is the red flags in our relationships and why we don't see them. If you believe in the law of attraction, you believe in like all of that work, the principle of the subconscious is that we attract what shows up in our lives. So yes, very often, not very often, yes, we are wounded and hurt by what actually happens. But if we stay in a victimized mode and just blame the external, you may not realize this, but I'm going to give you guys a solid fucking point. So if you have your book and your pen, write this down. If we are unconsciously blaming the external continuously, we're actually unconsciously also giving up our power to change the situation. Since we're back into this red flags, when I attract a relationship, when I attract a partner, at that point, it's already been predetermined in my subconscious what I want to happen in a relationship, what kind of partner I'm looking to attract. And so that's why right from the start, before the red flags even fucking come into play, we've already attracted and created an identity of what we want to happen. This may sound really complex. I'll give you an example. So again, when I was really young, I was the youngest of 5 children. My mom adopted my cousins, blah, blah, blah. So like I was the youngest of 7. My mom was emotionally drained by the time she had me. And so, you know, I've talked about it before, there was a lot of emotional and a lot of physical abuse that I experienced. And so there was massive wounds of like no love. I left home when I was like 12 years old to go to boarding school. So my whole life was filled with these abandonment wounds of like, where the fuck is my mom and why is she not loving me? I had a beautiful relationship in my 20s. And when I went through this massive breakup, so remember, breakup is the key point. Listen to this map, okay? So breakup, circle that. That is the key point that rocks to point number 2, abandonment wounds. Abandonment wounds or core wounds or childhood wounds, those are the ones that completely from the subconscious come and block you like this. So they put these blinders on you at this point, so you can't really see what you're really attracting. Your subconscious just says, I need to prove myself, I need to prove my love, I need to earn this love, I need to earn validation. And so what it does is your subconscious mind starts to attract people representative of your parents or your family or your childhood or people who don't give you love because it's trying to prove itself to them. And so unconsciously or subconsciously now you'll get into a relationship. For me, for example, after that massive breakup, I was so rocked on my feet, I didn't even realize. But unconsciously, I started to attract older women. And women who already had children, who were already like, you know, out of a relationship, in the process of like a separation or divorce, had children, had their lives set up and everything. And yet I was this like guy in his late 20s who's like, no, but what I want is marriage. I want a like strong relationship. I want like, you know, all this stuff together. I want to build a life. But here's what I was attracting. Now, here's the thing about the red flags. That should have been obvious fucking red flags right there, right? Like you're like, dude, you want this, but this is what you got. But my subconscious mind, which was so wounded and hurt, was protected by my ego, which my ego came in and said, no, we've got to find these people and we've got to show them that we're lovable. And so I attracted this woman and all my friends would say, dude, like, this is not good for you. This person already has this life, you know, they may be older. And we get into this place where the ego tries to be convincing. So here's the thing. Your ego does more and more to suppress those red flags. And so your ego starts to say right now, oh, no, love is just an open concept. Love has no age barrier. Love has no restrictions. Love has no this. This person is amazing like this, but they're so good at blah, blah. And like they teach me, they do this for me. And they may emotionally abuse me, but then they send me flowers. And like, that's also why we don't spot narcissists, emotional abuse, any of that. Because our ego has now clouded. Remember what I said? It's clouded where we are because our self-worth is so wounded. So if you have a pen and paper, remember, we start at that point where we talked about breakup, abandonment wounds, or like core wounds coming to the surface. Next point is ego. This is massively important for why you don't see red flags. Your ego actually tries to mask all of these red flags to be able to pretend you from being able to see it so that you can unconsciously go through the same process of abandonment and rejection all over again and again and again. Now, why does the ego do that? Because the ego wants you to basically remind yourself of the belief you had when you were a child, which is, I'm not fully lovable, I'm not fully worthy, I'm not fully like capable, I don't deserve love. So in my story, one older woman and that person went into the relationship, didn't work out, obviously. So then I moved on to the next and the next. And believe you me, my my ego was so strong, it would convince me that these people were so attractive for me in all ways, whether it was physically, emotionally, everything, and everybody else was like, man, this is emotionally not good for you, etc. And so I would try unconsciously to, like I said, to convince everybody. My ego would convince me, and so red flags in one relationship ended. Then the next relationship showed up and had even more red flags, and then that went through, and then that ended. Then the next one with even more red flags, which I didn't see, and then ultimately it became someone who was older and they were married and they had children, and I was in that middle of that situation. And it's only when that relationship like broke and I went through that massive level of pain, I had a choice. Now you get to point number 3, okay? So here's actually point number 4. So I've given you the trajectory. The trajectory is step number 1 is breakup. Step number 2 is your core wounds coming to the surface, abandonment, rejection, etc. Step number 3 is your ego comes in to try and convince you. Step number 4 after the ego is a pattern. How many of you, I want to ask you this honestly, for those of you who now have like found out your red flags in your previous relationship, I want to ask you honestly, how many relationships like that in your past have you had? Or better question, the red flags you saw in this previous relationship, have you been able to see that your past relationships had the same pattern of red flags? May not even be the exact ones, but very similar. Throw in the comments. I want to know truthfully if you've been able to spot it. Because if you've been able to spot it, you've got a fucking golden nugget sitting like in your pocket. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.